All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, it is not my intention to do several media stories in a row for Radar, but these people just keep giving me so much to work with. Yesterday, we talked about Taylor Lorenz. She's the star New York Times tech reporter caught red-handed spreading lies as the emblem for how tattletale journalism has ascended to the very top of American media. Today, we're actually going to go return to a far more familiar story, the soft media corruption and intimacy between the people in Washington who cover the White House and the people inside the White House when it's a Democratic administration. Yesterday morning, Washington awoke to a beautiful tale in People magazine, of all places. How Alexi McAmmond, a frequent NBC News guest and star political reporter for Axios, was in a relationship with TJ Ducklo. He's a White House deputy press secretary. He's the former press secretary for the Joe Biden campaign. The fluff piece details how McAmmond and Ducklo waited until November to start dating, how she was so in love that she asked to be reassigned to another beat from the White House. Okay, interesting. Good for them. Let's take a look under the hood. McAmmond says she was reassigned from covering the White House and to, yes, this is not a joke, covering progressives in Congress along with Vice President Kamala Harris. So a star political reporter literally dating the deputy White House press secretary was reassigned from Joe Biden to covering the Vice President of the United States, who of course also works for the White House and of course also is tied to the administration. Amazing. Conflicts of interest all solved. Even better, though, was the backstory of the story itself. Within the People magazine profile was a line from the two about how it was the worst kept secret in Washington. Maybe, because as all bad kept secrets in Washington, it was about to premiere in Politico Playbook this morning. In fact, Playbook, the insider newsletter that many people in D.C. read daily, revealed that on Monday, they had informed the White House comms team that the dating item would be included the next day. Hours later, the People magazine story surfaced, and the Biden White House staffers started pumping it out on Twitter to get a jump on the news. It's a tried and a true strategy. When a bad story is about to come out, you leak the details to a friendly outlet and you control the framing. By and large, that's basically what happened here, because the truth is a lot more murky than the one that was laid out in People. As Playbook has noted in the story that was rightfully theirs, McAmmond hasn't exactly left the Biden beat. Per her and Ducklo's own timeline, they disclosed their relationship to Axios and to the White House in November. Well, on December 19th, a story appeared in Axios about how Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms had rejected Joe Biden's offer to be the next head of the U.S. Small Business Administration. Maybe she got that story from her sources, or maybe she got it from her boyfriend. There's no real way to know. That's the problem. If there's not a clear line and there isn't a clear standard, then we ask questions which cast doubt on the journalistic profession as a whole. Or take this observation from Playbook. McAmmond, after disclosing the relationship to her bosses, was allowed on the company's flagship podcast in which she said, quote, "What we've seen from Biden is compassion and empathy and a focus on unity in a way that we certainly haven't seen from President Trump." Now look, it's not a crazy statement, but also something that inadvertently helps her boyfriend's boss. Now, according to McAmmond, she and Ducklo don't discuss professional matters when they're together, which, if you believe that, I have several bridges to sell you. So let's get down to it. Why does any of this even matter? Because coziness between journalists and their sources out in the open has drawn little to no outrage or scrutiny, which if the shoe were on the other foot and a journalist was dating the literal press secretary for the Trump campaign while reporting at a major outlet, I can guarantee you it would be major stories on CNN's Brian Stelter's program for weeks, and half of MSNBC's programming lineup would be dedicated to how unethical and awful it is. None of this is to disparage either of these people personally. She is a great reporter. I've even had her on this show. And Ducklo has actually shown tremendous personal strength in a battle with cancer. But instead, it's to pull back the curtain for all of you on something which is relatively business as usual and how it impacts the things that you hear and you see. If Politico Playbook had never reported this item and prompted the White House to seek refuge in People magazine, would any of us even know about it? No, we wouldn't. Axios certainly wasn't going to tell us. Neither was the White House. People listening to Axios' podcast, reading their coverage, watching her on MSNBC would have no idea that her boyfriend is literally one of the top communications aides for the Biden White House. And vice versa within the White House. Nobody knows if Ducklow's talking to Axios because it's literally where his girlfriend works. It's a tremendous conflict of interest, which should have been disclosed at the very least from Axios at the outset. And they clearly tried to bring very little attention to it. So that's that. I'm sure this is the last reporting you'll probably ever see on the subject. It just exists in the ether. And the next time that you see stories about why people don't trust the media, or why people question people's reporting, or people dare ask questions about how exactly scoops get got, or how reporters practice journalism, they will do what they always do, which is to talk about how people need more education to appreciate the media, or try and gaslight you into thinking everything is actually fine. Or my favorite, blame people for having completely reasonable questions, frame them as sexist or racist or fascist or whatever to avoid dealing with the underlying claim. The media became fake news to millions because they lost their credibility, not because you owe your trust to them. And that's actually the most key thing that I wanted to take away. It's like, I don't want to disparage, whatever. I hope you're happy, etc. But it was more about the lack of disclosure. I mean, it had to come out in Playbook. And then, even then, it is a real bullshit move. Just speaking as a reporter. Whenever you go to somebody when you go to someone with a story and you give them ability to comment, and then they sprint that to another outlet. That is mess up, okay? And especially by the way, from now on at the White House, don't complain if Playbook only gives you a 5-minute heads up in order for comment, because they can't trust you. It's a terrible thing to do whenever you're from a communication standpoint. But clearly they knew that it was such a terrible look that they had to try and get the glossy People magazine profile. And just all together, it shows you that you don't know how the books are being cooked here. We have no idea how these stories are getting, how they come into play, what people appear on TV, what they're advocating for or not. And I think that speaks to a much broader critique, which is that in this little instance, you get to peek behind the curtain, and you don't always like what you say.
Look, there's a real coziness between the Biden administration and all of the official Washington media. That's just, this is one very specific example. But look at how they've been covered so far. Look at how he was covered even during the primary. Look at how he was covered during the general election. It was always much more focused on how do we protect him? How do we treat him like a favored grandpa or uncle? He never got asked hard questions about his past support for the Iraq War or for Social Security. If he was, it was barely a focus at all. There was the sense of we have to sort of give him a pass on all of these things. The Hunter Biden situation at the end of the campaign, a perfect example of that. And look, on this, people fall in love, that's fine.
Yeah, that's great.
It's okay, we're not saying you can't do that, but you can't hide it.
No.
You can't not disclose it. That's just basic journalistic practice. If you have, when we were doing the GameStop stories, we're saying we're not financial experts, and by the way, here's the positions.
Exactly.
That's what you're supposed to do. When we have friends on this show, people that we know, even when they're not romantic part, we try to disclose
these are my friends.
Nina Turner's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
Look, if you're looking for an objective take on Nina Turner, you're probably not going to get it from me. That's just reality. Right. And I try to be upfront about that and the other, friendly relationships that we have on the show. But it's really super clear when you have a serious romantic relationship, you shouldn't even be on that beat, but at the very least, it should be disclosed. And Axios handled this in such a shady way.
Yeah. Taking her off, not saying anything, still allowing the stories.
They were caught.
Exactly.
Obviously, they say it was an open secret. Everybody knew.
Okay.
So they waited till they were caught by Playbook, and this item was going to come out. And then it was oh, no, we moved her off of that beat to Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
I think you're going to be objective on that beat either. And even if your intentions are the absolute best, and you really do try, even if you do buy her line that we don't talk about professional things together, which, okay, whatever.
Sure.
It's very hard not to be influenced by these religions.
No.
It's just the way people are wired.
Yes.
It's just the way that it works. You can't help but to sort of frame things in a more positive light, try to see things from their side of the spectrum, rather than being in the confrontational adversarial position that you should be as a prominent journalist with regards to people in power?
It's very simple. And look, I went through this. I had friends who worked, in communications, all that. They try and leverage their personal relationship with you in order to influence your coverage.
Oh, absolutely.
And you have to be like, God, they try to make you feel bad, and you know that you're going to have, that's just a friendship thing. Now imagine, it's something where it's your literal significant other. That's a problem. And it's just, again, Axios should have been upfront from this thing from the very beginning. They waited until they got caught. Then the White House also waited until they got caught, sprinted it to People magazine. And, they didn't include any of the details, which Playbook did, which was like, hey, actually, she's commented about Biden on the podcast and has reported on his administration after she disclosed it, which, do you believe the disclosure or not? So what happened exactly there? And that is the thing. How many more things do we not know about on these different outlets? Are we just waiting for somebody? This is the other thing. You can't wait for the media to turn on itself. This will cause problems in the Washington media social circle, like the people who reported on this. It's going to cause issues. Yeah. And you can't always count on people to go against their social interests. That's the whole point of this whole segment. So there you go.
Exactly right. Next on Rising, Democratic strategist Roger Fisk and principal at Silent Majority Strategies Keith Naughton are going to join us for the panel. That's when Rising returns.